The United States debt crisis did not begin with a banking crash or a pandemic. It began the moment the dollar lost its soul, August 15, 1971. This is the precise date the American dream was decoupled from reality. On that Sunday night, President Richard Nixon didn't just interrupt a television broadcast, he executed the gold standard. Before that moment, $35 was a legal claim on 1 ounce of gold. By the time his speech ended, your money was nothing but a paper promise backed by politicians. He called it a shock. The world called it a default. This single decision unleashed the terrifying math that is currently eating your savings. You are not looking at history. You are looking at the crime scene that explains why you work harder but get poorer. Nixon said it was temporary. 54 years later, the temporary emergency has become a permanent nightmare. Rewind to 1944. The world was in ruins, but the United States held the keys to the kingdom. Specifically, it held 2/3 of all the gold on the planet. While Europe was burning, America was building the vault. They gathered 730 delegates at a hotel in New Hampshire to sign the Bretton Woods Agreement. But let's call it what it really was: golden handcuffs. The system was designed to be boring. It was designed to force discipline on politicians who naturally lack it. The rule was simple: $35 equaled 1 ounce of gold. Period. It was a contract written in metal. If you held a US dollar anywhere in the world, from Tokyo to Paris, you didn't just hold paper, you held a claim check for American gold. The dollar was the anchor, and gold was the chain. For 25 years, this system created an illusion of perfect order. Global trade flourished. The American middle class exploded. It felt like the financial perpetual motion machine had finally been invented. But there was a cheater in the room. To be the world's reserve currency, the United States had to export dollars. We had to flood the global market with greenbacks so other nations could use them for trade. This is the Triffin paradox. To run the global economy, you have to run a trade deficit. You have to send dollars out. But every dollar that left American shores was a potential claim on the gold sitting in Fort Knox. As long as foreign nations trusted the US, they were happy holding the paper. Paper is light. Paper is easy to move. Gold is heavy. Gold is hard to store. But trust is a finite resource. And by the 1960s, the United States government began to abuse it. They wanted the Great Society welfare programs. And they wanted the Vietnam War. They wanted guns. And they wanted butter. But they didn't want to raise taxes to pay for them. So they did what every empire eventually does. They turned on the printer. They printed money to pay for the bombs. They printed money to pay for the bureaucrats. They printed money to keep the voters happy. On the surface, the dollar was still pegged at $35 an ounce. But in reality, the supply of paper money had completely detached from the supply of gold. By 1971, there were 4 times more dollars in circulation than there was gold to back them up. The US government was essentially operating a fractional reserve Ponzi scheme on a global scale. We were writing checks our vault couldn't cash, banking entirely on the hope that nobody would ever walk up to the teller window and actually ask for the metal. But in the world of high finance, secrets don't stay secret forever. The French were looking at the math, and they didn't like what they saw. The smart money was about to make a move that would force the president's hand. It started with a politely worded letter from Paris, but the subtext was a declaration of financial war. General Charles de Gaulle, the president of France, smelled smoke. He looked at the mountain of US dollars flooding into Europe and realized they were essentially IOUs from a broke gambler. He didn't want the paper, he wanted the metal. So France began redeeming their dollar reserves for gold bars, draining the US Treasury. It was a classic bank run. But instead of angry villagers with pitchforks, it was sovereign nations with diplomatic pouches. By 1971, the United States was bleeding gold reserves at an alarming rate, driven by the crushing costs of the Vietnam War and domestic social programs. The vault was emptying, the game was up. Cornered and desperate, President Nixon summoned his inner circle to Camp David on August 13, 1971. It wasn't a cabinet meeting, it was a conspiracy. The atmosphere was thick with cigar smoke and panic. He brought in John Connally, the Treasury Secretary, a tough-talking Texan who operated on a simple philosophy: the dollar is our currency, but it's your problem. He brought in Paul Volcker, the chain-smoking technocrat who understood the plumbing of the financial system better than anyone. Even Arthur Burns, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, was dragged into the plot despite his fears that this political maneuver would destroy the Fed's reputation. They isolated themselves in the woods of Maryland. They cut the phone lines. They didn't consult the State Department. They didn't warn their allies. They operated in total secrecy because they knew what they were about to do would shatter the foundation of the global economy. They faced a binary choice. Option 1 was austerity. Stop printing money, raise interest rates, and plunge the US into a deep recession to save the integrity of the gold standard. Option 2 was default. Break the promise, keep the gold, and cheat the creditors. Politicians never choose austerity. They chose the default. They decided to execute the plan on a Sunday night. This was a calculated tactical ambush designed to blindside the global markets before the Tokyo Stock Exchange opened on Monday morning. They wanted the world to wake up to a fait accompli, with no time to react, no time to dump dollars, and no time to protest. On the evening of August 15th, the cameras rolled. Nixon looked into the lens. He didn't blink. He framed the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, not as a failure of American fiscal policy, but as a patriotic move to defend the dollar against international speculators. He used the language of protection to mask an act of confiscation. Then he delivered the kill shot. He announced that he had directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. He looked the world in the eye and defaulted. The genius of the lie was not in the action itself, but in the vocabulary. In his address, Nixon did not say he was destroying the gold standard. He said he was directing the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend it temporarily. It was a masterclass in political linguistics. In the Dictionary of Government, temporary is a synonym for eternity. It has been 54 years since that Sunday night, and the gold window remains painted shut. They bought silence with a promise they never intended to keep, knowing that by the time the public realized the suspension was permanent, the system would already be too entrenched to change. But Nixon didn't just declare war on gold. He declared war on basic arithmetic. In the same breath, he announced a 90-day freeze on all wages and prices across the United States. It was an attempt to outlaw inflation by decree. Picture the absurdity of the federal government trying to micromanage the price of a gallon of milk and a union worker's paycheck from the Oval Office. They sent agents to inspect grocery stores, threatening business owners who dared to raise prices to reflect reality. It was economic theater of the highest order. You cannot fight the laws of supply and demand with a badge. The result was not stability, it was shortage. When you artificially suppress prices while printing money, the goods simply vanish from the shelves. It was a lesson the Soviets learned the hard way, and for 90 days capitalist America played the same delusional game. This was the moment the US dollar underwent a fundamental transmutation. Before 1971, money was an asset. It was a title deed to a physical commodity that required effort to mine and refine. After 1971, money became a liability. It became fiat. The word fiat is Latin for let it be done. It is a command from above. In the context of modern economics, it translates roughly to it has value because I said so. The dollar was no longer anchored to the earth. It was anchored to the credibility of the United States government. The restraint was gone. The handbrake was cut. The politicians had discovered a magic trick. They could buy votes today and send the bill to generations not yet born. The era of sound money was over. The era of infinite debt had begun. Look at the chart of the United States national debt. For nearly 200 years, it looked like a flat line, spiking only during major wars and then returning to earth. Then came 1971. The line didn't just rise, it went vertical. When Nixon severed the link to gold, he didn't just change monetary policy. He removed the only physical restraint on government spending. In 1971, the national debt was a manageable 35% of GDP. It was a debt that could be paid. Today, that number has exploded to over 120%. We have crossed the mathematical event horizon. The government is no longer borrowing to build bridges or win wars. It is borrowing just to pay the interest on what it already owes. This is where the concept of crowding out moves from a textbook theory to a weapon against your bank account. When the government acts as a black hole for capital, sucking up trillions of dollars from the economy to finance its deficit, there is no oxygen left for the rest of us. Investment in the real economy shrinks, productivity stalls, but the most brutal consequence is invisible. It explains the mystery of why housing prices have skyrocketed while your wages have barely moved in real terms. It is called the Cantillon effect. When new money is printed, it does not rain down on everyone equally. It flows first to the banks, the government contractors, and the asset holders. They get to spend the money before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to your paycheck, the cost of living has already surged. You are running on a treadmill that is being sped up by the Federal Reserve. You are working harder to chase assets that are inflating faster than your labor can keep up. Do not make the mistake of thinking this is an error in the system. The system isn't broken. It is working exactly as designed. It was re-engineered in 1971 to transfer wealth from those who work for money to those who print it. The gold standard was a leash on power. When they cut the leash, they didn't set the dollar free. They set the debt free. And now the bill is coming due. There is no political solution to a mathematical problem. Do not wait for a savior to reverse the damage done in 1971. The debt has grown too large to ever be repaid in honest currency. The only way out for the state is to print, to inflate, and to dilute the value of the labor you provide. Economists call this Ricardian equivalence. The idea that every dollar borrowed today is a tax you will pay tomorrow. But they won't tax your income, because that would cause a revolt. Instead, they will tax your purchasing power. They will tax your grocery bill. They will tax your life savings until they are worth nothing. The experiment that began with a lie on a Sunday night is reaching its logical conclusion. The paper in your wallet is burning, slowly and invisibly. The storm of 1971 never ended. It just got quiet. The only question left is simple. When the music stops, are you holding paper promises, or are you holding real value? If you want to survive the next chapter of history, stop listening to what they say, and watch what they do.